Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. And thank you for being with us. Those who join us now, those who will see this video later. Just really grateful that you can be with us for our very first Act Together live session. So if you're not following Act Together and you don't know what it is, Act Together is a partnership, an initiative started by several organizations that is celebrating partnership between younger and older people and changing the life in communities and anywhere in the world, really. And so we decided to start these live sessions where we always invite someone that comes and talks about how they're doing this work, how they're changing their communities, how they are working in partnership between children and adults, younger and older, and how can we all help this wonderful work. So the first Act Together session will be dedicated to changing youth justice systems, and we have our guests Denzel and Sarah that they will introduce themselves just in a moment. Just in case you want to know who I am, because that might be useful, I'm Luis. I work for the Learning for Being Foundation, who is hosting these Act Together live sessions. So just to introduce a little bit the topic, we thought we would start with Sarah and Denzel first because they were really ready to talk about their experience, the work that they were doing. So that's always a good reason. Also because it's a very special time in the United States where Denzel and Sarah live, where there's a lot at stake. And if you guys have been following everything that has been going on, both in terms of the elections, but also all the movements around Black Lives Matter and, and all the youth activist movements in the States, so this is probably something that you're going to enjoy. So I'm actually not going to try to say much more than that. I'm just going to ask very simply first, Denzel, so where are you and what is catching your attention right now in this moment of your life?
Thank you, Luis. My name is Denzel. I'm 21 years old, and I work with Sarah on a number of different projects. And Free Right Arts Literacy is a nonprofit organization that does art literacy work with incarcerated young folks. And currently, right now, what's capturing my attention and what's been going on, like you just talked about, was probably the election. This is my first year ever voting, so it's pretty new experience for me, and just trying to motivate a lot of my peers to vote as well.
Thank you, Denzel. How about you, Sarah? Where are you? Some kind of hermit's hut at the top of a mountain, contemplating?
Yeah. No, not so much contemplation. I am usually located in Chicago, not too far from where Denzel lives. But at the moment, I'm out west in Colorado, helping to take care of some folks who needed a hand. And I like Denzel, I'm thinking a lot about this upcoming election and what that will mean for so many people in this country and frankly around the world. So it's a heavy moment for us here. So, and I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're the ones that are really thankful that you guys joined in for the very first live session. I also want to tell the people that might be watching us live. So if you are either through Facebook or YouTube and you're following this conversation, we welcome your comments and we welcome your expressions of love, but also your questions or your criticism. Feel free to engage with us. At some point, I will, have a little look at what's going on. We'll put some comments on the screen, and we'll also invite Denzel and Sarah to answer some of the questions. But let's move right into the heart of the matter. So we keep on saying, okay, we gave a title to our session, which is about reimagining youth justice in the US in particular, which is where you are situated, and you're working towards that. So my question to you is, how did you meet? Maybe I actually start again with Denzel. How did you meet, and how did you start working together?
Thank you. To give a little context, how me and Sarah met was probably not the most traditional or common way. And like I was saying, to get a little bit of context, and I might not have mentioned in the previous question, but I'm in Chicago right now, and I'm from Chicago, born and raised Chicago, Illinois. And our relationship met actually, me and Sarah met after I was released from the Department of Juvenile Justice, which is like a system for like prisons for juveniles. So when I was about 15 years old, I was incarcerated, and from 15 until 20, I was locked up, and all the years in between. During those like the early stages of those years, a lot of it was like pretty much like finding myself, figuring out what did I want to do in life, and identifying like a lot of factors and obstacles that I had to face growing up. I grew up without a father, and I grew up in a household with my mother and two older sisters. And with my mom having a lack of schooling, we didn't have very much money growing up, and that didn't position me for like a lot of opportunity as a young person, but also different obstacles just facing like in my everyday life. So after spending a few years incarcerated, I kind of figured out what trajectory and path I wanted to choose for my life. I knew that it was kind of based around helping other young people and peers who I feel like are great individuals and young people who have like so much knowledge and just so much to offer. It's just that a lot of times in the neighborhoods that we live in, it's not that many opportunities to do positive work, and not very much money. So your everyday life is probably geared towards trying to survive, which is kind of painful, but it's the reality. While inside, I started trying to figure out ways to motivate my peers by starting book clubs and programs for rehabilitation and helping youth like figure out what skills and school path they might choose for themselves. I started like book clubs and different things, and I started gaining attention from like the staff and the administration from the prisons. And they thought that, I had a lot of potential to do a lot of great work. So I, went to school, got my high school diploma while I was locked up, started taking college courses. And then when I got out, because of the relationship I developed with the administration throughout the prisons that I've spent in, they patched me in with Sarah, who was working in on a project that was just starting up. And then that's when me and her got her started. And I'll like pass it off to Sarah so she can speak more closely on that project.
Sure.
Thank you.
So yeah, I was just incredibly, incredibly lucky to have received Denzel's name and number, and I gave him a call. We were at a point in a project, I think we'll get a little bit more into it, but primarily what the work that we were doing was looking at centering the voices of impacted people about how they, if put in charge of the system, would reimagine it. What would they do to prevent young people from getting into trouble, and also deal with harm after it had happened, in terms of honoring youthfulness and development and getting people on the right track. And we started doing that by facilitating conversations first in communities that sent the most kids into the system, where the most kids were coming from. And then next we were moving on to the project going to the 5 youth prisons in Illinois. And it became clear early in the project that since the project was about centering youth voices, since they are the primary, primarily the ones impacted by the youth justice system, that the work needed to be co-facilitated and co-led with young people really driving the work. And as a result, we were looking for young people who are interested, and Denzel was referred to me. And really, there's no better job reference than having a young person who has spent so much time incarcerated, and the first question you ask him is, how would you feel about going back inside prison in like 2 weeks? And when I tell you there wasn't a half a second of hesitation in his voice, he was like, absolutely. And so that was just the beginning of a tremendous learning experience for me. And he's really paved the way for that. So we got really lucky.
And I got lucky to have you both here. I was listening to Denzel and I was thinking, gosh, like I'm so ignorant about really the what's going on in the world. It's a world in itself, because you were saying, okay, so I spent these years in an institution, but while I was there, I was also, continuing my studies, and I was engaged in some form of community work and all of that. So it feels to me like it's a whole world in itself, of which we folks, at least I speak living in Portugal, we get just like either the stereotypes or the dramatic stories. So I'm really thankful that you show us like another perspective. You will see that my colleague Emma, that you can't see, but she's actually with us in the call in the backstage. She's putting some stats, some information that we got from Sarah and Denzel about the situation about the youth justice systems in the state. At the end of this video, we will include all of these and put the links to the sources so that you can explore more and get to know more. So stay tuned to see, to catch all the little facts that we're sharing with you. So you guys are working, you guys, Sarah and Denzel, you're working to change, reimagine the youth justice system. So in the States, at least, or maybe more particularly in Illinois. One question that one would ask, in a very kind of coming from a place of ignorance, is what is there to change? I mean, what the system was put together in a particular way by people who thought this was like a good idea, but you guys have a different view. You think that there are some things that are really making lives of young people difficult and in consequence of the whole community and society. So if I would ask, maybe now I'll start with you, Sarah, what are the things that for you are like, we really need to change these because they are like rottening the system somehow? And then I'll ask the same question to Denzel.
Sure. I do want to just say one note about sort of, I think one of the amazing things that Denzel brings to this work is that his experience in many ways of an incarcerated young person was unique. And I think one of the things that we share is that, and he'll have to jump in if I'm not saying this correctly, but that his belief and his willingness to sort of go back into prison after being incarcerated for so long was actually his belief that as much as he was seen as unique in that system, that the young people that he was incarcerated with, he saw that same potential in so many of them. And that was like some of what drove the need to, his desire to stay engaged in the work and trying to make changes. So I just want to make a note of that in terms of setting the stage. But I think in terms of the sort of juvenile justice system in the United States, or specifically in Illinois, there are huge. The question maybe is more like what we shouldn't change versus what we should change. But maybe it's helpful to sort of contextualize the project we're doing, because in many ways, or we've been working on, because in many ways it had kind of a narrow focus, which was to say that we're in a moment in the United States, you know, depending on where folks that are listening are, I'm sure there are things that you hear and things that you don't, but we're at a point of a really difficult moment of really needing to face our history in the United States and issues of systemic racism and compounding impacts of that, and how that has sort of intersected with the criminal justice system, and in particular also with the youth justice system. But the project so we're at a moment of like really needing, like where reform may not work and really needing to reimagine what we do and why we do it. And I think so this project that we were working on actually in some ways had a very narrow focus, which was how can we center the voices of those who have been historically not included in the conversations about reimagining, or even if those were conversations about reform, how can we make sure that they have a place at the table? And in particular, to that was, how can young people have a place at the table? We are not a country that has a long history of making sure that youth voices are heard, even though youth voices have been at the center of many important and critical movements and times of change in the United States. And so the objective of this was really that very narrow focus of bringing youth voices to the table. But in terms of just sort of bullet pointing, like, there is no evidence to show that we should be incarcerating young people in adult-like facilities, or that we should be transferring young people to the adult criminal justice system, which is something that happens frequently in the United States. That that the system, it disproportionately impacts young people of color, that it is extraordinarily costly, and we spend far more money incarcerating young people than we do educating them, not overall, but dollar for dollar if you compare those two systems. And so there's a lot that needs to change. And I think for me, at least, what reinforced that was spending time with incarcerated young people, and just, incredible potential and hope. So I don't know, Denzel probably will have something to jump in.
Yeah. What would you say are the things, and maybe you have a very different perception because it's like, you had a very direct experience with it. What would you say for you are the things that are, okay, these ones really gotta go?
I would definitely say also, like, I would like to give you guys like probably a clear understanding from like my perspective of like, my life around this matter. So I feel like growing up, the juvenile justice system, the prison system was like created for me. And I feel like it was created for me and other young people like myself, because growing up in communities, like since I was always younger, growing up, like policing in our areas and the neighborhoods that I was raised was like very aggressive. I was taught to always be like afraid of police. I've been stopped even before ever having criminal activity for no reason, and like, messed with by police. And I feel like that's like an early stage of where it starts. Also adding that in your communities, and it goes back to like even like the war on drugs, where like the United States like pretty much declared a war which is on drugs. And instead of like helping people with drug addictions, like because maybe they have an issue or they're dealing with something, and giving them the right proper treatment and resources, they lock everyone up. So many people of color, our fathers and mothers and everything, like was stripped away from their homes. So that left a lot of like mothers and children to fend for themselves. And policing in those areas just became very brutal. And it was later found out that it was targeted and specific to Black people. So I feel like that's at an early stage where it started, and then it became like a cycle now that's already pretty much created, where in life you're growing up as a young person, and the environments you live in with the police, it's almost like you're almost a target for a lot of different things. And then our education systems in our schools are extremely underfunded, and it's lacking a lot of things that would capture a young person's attention so that they could be prepared to go to school, do what they might need to, like outside of school, like extracurricular activities. and also to shed and bring light to even my incarcerated circumstances. Many of what I told you, like the programs that I started and been a part of, and with schooling, it was a fight. It was like a fight tooth and nail to go to school. It wasn't easy for me to get college courses. It wasn't easy for me to start book clubs because I had to start it, like myself. And I'm just one young person amongst many young people in a space where we sit around many hours of the day, not doing anything productive. And I had to, think to myself like, hey y'all, instead of maybe watching TV or playing cards, like maybe we all just pick up a book and just start, brainstorming different ideas for, ourselves, because some young men like want to be artists and businessmen and doctors, but it doesn't oftentimes seem very real. Growing up, I never really thought that um, like I was saying, like the system was always kind of like meant for you. Like you would have contact in some way as a young black man just coming up. So being that those things are that real for me and for so many other young people, it would make you want to reimagine that system and then ask those people, how should we reimagine it? Because you're the ones living in it every day and going through it. And for many youth like myself, it becomes normal. So having police mess with you, gun violence, prisons, jails, like it becomes a part of your natural world, and it's something that you don't want to look forward to, but it's probably real. So you just have to do your best to, I would say, you know, just overcome.
Uh, so just before I know Sarah wants to add something to what is being said. I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes, and growing up in an environment where people like, the way you say it, it seems like this was made for me. It's like it was tailored for whatever I represent. At which moment can you describe like a moment as you were growing up where you felt like you looked around or you experienced something, even before your age of 15, which was the first moment you had an experience of being incarcerated, where you looked around and like, man, the world is kind of against me right now. Like this game is rigged for me to lose. Can you describe a moment where you felt that? Like, what was happening? What is it that you witnessed? What is it that you experienced?
It probably happened when I was really young and I wasn't aware that me and my family was living pretty close to poverty. Sometimes the lights will cut off, or it'll be tough and a struggle to pay for the rent and bills and things like that. And I remember I was watching TV, and we have in the United States, it's a show called like Zack and Cody, and it's about two young boys who are around my age, but they grew up in like a super fancy like hotel in like upscale New York, and they were like rich, and they were like having like crazy adventures inside this hotel that was full of other, rich folks. And I used to tell my mom, I'm like, why can't we go do that or do this or do that? And I really looked around for a second and I thought about it like, I don't really look like them. So maybe is that why? But because like I was so young, I also didn't kind of see color because I feel like we're just boys. Like they play just like I play. They do the same wacky adventures I do, except when I do it, um, they might have a laugh at the end of the day, and like when I do it, it might be in the back of a squad car, or like locked up, or it seemed dangerous, So it just seemed like I couldn't only also I wouldn't only appropriate that because of just like money issues, but like as far as like even academics and educations, like getting a chance to see how other young people like they went to school and how their homes and different communities were set up with programs and different resources. I was like, I never had that opportunity growing up. So is it my fault that maybe I went a different path?
Thank you, Denzel. Sarah, you wanted to chip in on?
Yeah, I think one way to conceptualize the changes that we see that we want to see happen in the United States with regards to youth justice is that, you know, we've sort of put the responsibility on the shoulders of individual young people for poverty and systemic racism and a failed education system and a tremendous, you know, and again, the compounding impacts over years and years on the shoulders of young people through, you know, criminalizing them. And I think, you know, it really comes down to ensuring that every young person and normalize that. I think that's a lot of what Denzel's talking about, like what becomes normalized in a particular community that absolutely is not something that should be normalized for any child, and creating a system that provides opportunity for a meaning and flourishing future for any young person, even when something bad or harmful has happened, and sort of acknowledging their fundamental youthfulness, whether you approach that through adolescent brain development and brain science, or looking through the root causes and the challenges and sort of inequities and injustices that they've faced, that, you know, using prison as a solution for that and denying them, you know, real opportunities to be a child and to and in that unique sort of status and culpability is what's critical, and sort of as we look at it overall. So
thank you, Sarah. Before we move on to understanding a little bit, so how are you actually working together? So there are many ways one can try to change this, and fortunately I think you two are not the only ones that are engaged with changing the system, but you have an experience to share, and I'm going to ask you about it in a minute. I just want to really acknowledge the people that are with us and that have been making comments, either, you know, expressing their support or nuancing some of the things that you've been saying. I want to thank Rhea, Kate, Joe, Gemma, Konstantinos for being with us and watching us. And I'm just naming a few, at least those who were putting some comments in the chat. So let's find out, how does a day of working together look like? So you can either tell us an anecdote or just describe a little bit, how is it that you're trying to make the change? Sarah already described it a little bit in the context of the project that brought you together in terms of reaching out to communities and running these talks. But I'd like to know more about, you know, how do you approach people? What is it that you actually do? What's happening in these talks? Denzel, can you tell us a little bit, give us a glimpse of what your work looks like?
Yeah, day in the life with me and Sarah is pretty spectacular, I would say. I feel like a lot of people that shared any amount of time like with us in a work environment, because so we do focus groups for the project in communities, but in particular the ones that stood out to me the most is like within the prison walls. So me and Sarah would first we would actually call the prison and ask the youth what are their favorite foods, and we would go grab those foods and then bring it inside the prisons and break bread with them. And not because to start off, I would say it's more so like a token of respect for sharing space with us and spending time with us. And then me and Sarah would then play games with them to start and warm everybody up. Well, the young people, we would ask that no guards be in the room, so that when we ask the youth particular questions about the institution and their reimagining for the institution, none of their words would be hindered because they might feel, apprehensive to say something around a guard and maybe face punishment later. So we asked that no guards be in the room. At no time ever during any of these focus groups we had any problems with the food, with behavior, respect. Like we always was met with tremendous respect. We played games, and then we passed out fact sheets that surrounded, and some of which that may pop up on the screen here today, of the statistics that young people face, the discriminatory factors and disproportionate stats about the races that are being locked up and at rates. And we then just had, held discussions about, how can we reimagine these systems. And Sarah so much, like I would say like she came to me in a way that never made me feel like she was trying to control or demand anything of me. She got to know me personally, and she didn't rush it. Me and Sarah's relationship actually built over time, And even in the prepping stages, Sarah always included me in just, conversations about how should we go about it. We're a team. And that always just gave me so much encouragement and motivation to like even, just give all that I can and, provide as much, clarity to the youth and in many different ways. But it was always great like doing work with Sarah. And you can also follow up to give more.
Before I move on to Sarah, you talk about like you were describing this moment where you have this kind of ice-breaking games to generate some trust in the group, but you also talked about something super important, which is to make sure that there are no let's say people present that might make the group feel like they're, it's not safe to disclose or to voice an opinion. But you said, okay, there are these moments where we distribute these fact sheets about, like different data about what's happening with people. You're talking about the people we have in front of you, but you're kind of giving a bigger picture. Would you say that people are aware of what's going on in terms of numbers? And like I was seeing one of the statements about how people get life sentences, for instance, young people getting life sentences, the amounts. Are people aware of how much the system is designed in this way, and how many people are affected by it?
I would say not actually, because we asked before we distributed the fact sheets, we asked them questions about it in particular. So we would say to a youth, "How much do you think it would cost to house you in this facility for 1 year?" And then a youth might say, "Okay, it's a whole year. That's a lot. So maybe." I might cost $100 a day and do the math, and maybe they end up with $50,000 or $10,000 it might cost because also to give note of why we brought food and everything, they can't eat whatever foods. Like they have state food that the state will provide for the youth. We have to wear clothes, so like these worn out blue shirts that when I was in there, I wore like probably 3 other youth then probably wore before me, and all of these conditions with school and things. And we ended up finding out the numbers that they were saying were not even close to like the actual numbers. A lot of the numbers are way higher. So youth are in these, situations and predicaments they really don't know. Well, some don't know, like, the circumstances surrounding their lives and opportunities and things.
Sarah, what's your experience of working? Like, what would your work look like? I mean, there's the part that you obviously do with Denzel, working with these groups, but then there's also all the architecture behind, which makes the project that you're described before. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, I think there's, of course, like, the logistics and coordination and all those kinds of things. I think with this particular project, one notable thing is really trying to stay the course of a commitment to having a collaborative and youth-led project, and the sort of attention and focus that it takes to maintain that and to prioritize that. And Denzel makes that incredibly easy. And and I have felt just incredibly fortunate and have learned so much. And I think that that comes from work and attention and honesty and sort of conversation. But also, like, really trying to be conscientious of not just saying, oh, we'll just do this because it's fast, or we'll do this because it's easier. So I think that's just something that's important, that a real commitment to that takes a lot of work.
So is there like a sequence? So let's say, okay, so there's all the groundwork of reaching out to these at least 5 institutions that you're working with directly, and then there are the visits where you're working with young people who are incarcerated, and you are, a lot of it is about raising awareness with these communities. And then the idea is also to collect their, an expression you use, uplift their voices, right? And so how do you do that? How does what you hear and what these people express, these young people express, then gets some channel or some way of being passed to the ears that should be hearing those voices. So what is the channel? What is the path?
If Denzel, you want to take it, or you want me to take it? Okay.
If you go on, you go on. Sorry, it was for you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I think for us in particular, we have just Denzel and I spent the summer. COVID, we have spent many a Zoom call and a conference call, and I'm surprised he's not sick of hearing my voice, because we have spent the summer. We were actually very, very fortunate that we had one facility that we hadn't finished our workshops in, and we were really, to the credit of the institution, they gave us the flexibility to do the sessions over Zoom. And so we finished sort of the work of actively engaging in conversation with incarcerated young people. And we should also mention, we did separate sessions with guards. So we, as a total, not with guards and young people together, but separately facilitating conversations with prison guards, hearing sort of what their perspective was. But and then we've spent the summer sort of taking all the data and the sort of amazing things that young people said. And also, I think one of the things that was striking to us was sort of the consistency of what people said. There was a lot of young people said the same thing, and in some ways that we sort of take as the testament of, like, this is not actually that we need to reinvent the wheel. In many ways, young people know what they need to have opportunity to not have contact with the justice system, and then to heal or grow or thrive even when they do. So we have just finished a first draft that's sort of in the process of getting published, of a report that that Denzel and I and a couple other folks co-authored. And I think the difficulty there was just, we would leave a workshop and be like, oh, how can we possibly capture how amazing that was? And I think that was a really prominent thing. It was hard to translate, because I've been working in prisons for many years. It was striking, sort of the vulnerability, the insight, the generosity, and the seriousness that young people that they took these how they approached the conversations, what they shared, and it was really hard and continues to be hard to capture. So it is a challenge.
So can I ask you, Denzel, because just to pick on that, because I'm assuming, any person listening to these stories firsthand would have their response, with whoever they are and how they take it, their experience and sensibilities. But I'm assuming that it might be very different, like from Sarah, who's someone very interested in this work, in this cause, and working with it, from someone who is to a certain extent a peer. So you're hearing these young people talking about their experiences. How is it for you suddenly being a little bit in between two worlds, which is, kind of on the being a peer to these young people, but at the time being there in a professional role, leading them through a process? What was your feelings, your impact?
I would say that was probably the only thing that made me a little nervous about going back inside the institutions, was because I was just thinking, like, how my guys receive me, like when I was inside, I was a pretty likable guy. Other guys are they're pretty cool guys. So we always had I always had a pretty good relationship with other youth. And when I got out, I was thinking maybe, they might not receive me the same, seeing that I'm in a different, path in life. And I was kind of nervous. And even the guards, like how they might even talk to me, and because I'm a free, man now, I'm not a locked up youth. So I would want that same respect commanded to me as well. And when I went back inside, the youth embraced me with just tremendous love. Like one time we walked into a group, and like there was like dudes in there like, oh my God, like you're out and you're coming back in and you're for us, and they told us like that gives us motivation to be a positive role model for young people. And they were asking that we want more people like Denzel to come back and speak to us, because this is the people that we connect to. Like, we see that he's out and he's doing, good things with his life, and he's going in a positive direction, and he's also giving back to where he came from. Um, and being that I know that so many young people have so much potential, I know that it's real. And oftentimes there aren't many people like me who go back and speak at my age. And like, I used to, like, I was talking to youth that I literally was like in a cell next to. So it's just crazy for them to be like, wow, you really got out and you made something of yourself. How can I follow that same path? Who are the people that I tap in and get in contact with so that I can reach, a place of doing similar to what you do? Because like I was just saying, and I spoke on a little bit before, like growing up for me and growing up for many of those other youths, I have to, now that I've been out, I've been able to get on a plane. So I've been able to travel across the state. So I go back when I was going inside the prison, I was like, hey, y'all, I took a trip to a different state, and many of us have never been on a plane before, because I've never been on a plane before until I got out. So those situations, just trying to bring them as much motivation, and kind of just try to help them see themselves in a different light, because like I was saying, that system is meant for you and they feel the same way. So how can they see a different light, a different path for themselves? How can they see a different world for themselves? And I become like a model for that, I feel like. And I'm so appreciative that they embrace me with the love that they do.
It's cool. Sarah, you wanna?
I just cannot overemphasize enough what Denzel is talking about in terms of, I mean, one of the consistent, like in every workshop we did, what young people talk about was the need for mentors and people who have had shared and similar experiences to provide sort of someone to walk with towards on a different path. And I really cannot overemphasize what the impact of, I think it was both in Denzel's strength and being able to walk back through those, prison doors. Like, those are the doors that every kid wants to walk one way out of, and he walked the other way back in. And how it really, the power of that, and how much it spoke to the need, right? And how we view and think of resources and stories, and the power of where the resources are and where the stories are. So it was an incredibly powerful, it would have been an entirely different project without the role that Denzel played.
Yeah, I bet. So there are two questions that are in the comments, one from Joe Dillons and the other one from John Begust. I hope I'm pronouncing both your names properly. And they are potentially provocative, each in their own way. I will read it to you. There's also one from Rhea that also came on. But the first one from Joe Dillon, let's start with that one. So Joe is saying, we need to focus more on abolition. We really need change, defund police, and channel money into support. ? Sorry. So what do you think? Is this, I mean, I don't think you need to be speaking for, a country or even your institution. This is really your own opinion. What do you think about this idea of defunding the police and channeling money into support for young incarcerated people? Whoever wants to take it. Okay. Denzel.
I was pointing to him. I think no. You take this one, Denzel. You take it.
Okay, you go, Denzel. You seem very non-verbally enthusiastic. So now you have to commit.
I got it. I would definitely say I'm in complete agreement with the comment. I 100% am. I'm an abolitionist, so I believe in closing prisons, because I feel like in a world where most of the institutions that we create that are rather, like I was saying earlier, like an aggressive, attacking, it's not trying to help people, because the reason people may have brought them there is because a lack of resources and funding, and they really just need support. Like, some people, let's say they got caught for drugs and they spent time locked up, and then they get out and now they're a felon. Now they can't get a job. So now that person has to go rob somebody. Like, is it really his fault? Like, why didn't you give him the support that he needed? So inside, maybe job training. So when he got out, he could have been a carpenter and then built a house for him and his family or anything. But instead, we do it the opposite way. It's like, you commit a crime, we punish you, then inside we make it bad and harsh, and then we give police more money to make sure they find more reasons to punish you later. And I feel like definitely that's not the way to go. And we need to spend more time and money in investing in communities and resources in families and mental health and rehabilitation.
Yeah, that was one of the facts that passed around, which was 33 out of 50 states spend more than $100,000 per year on incarcerating young people, much more than the average expenditure on public education. You know, so that says something. Do you wanna say something, Sarah? Yeah.
That number doesn't include sort of pre-trial costs, or that's just the cost of like I mean, it depends on, each state calculates costs differently, but that's the cost of like, your soap and your food and the people that are working there. We're not talking about the costs before and after, and cost to community and loss of resources and other things. So
yeah. So while I have you, just one question quickly, I think you might be able to answer because it's very simple and technical. For those who don't know, a question from Rhea: what is the youngest age that someone can be incarcerated? So what's the youngest incarcerated youth?
So that would vary from state to state. Some states do not have like an age of sort of criminality, a minority age of criminality, meaning like, it depends on, so it's a very big question because the United States, each state, there's federal law and there's state law. So that would be a question that would vary by state. But for example, I think the youngest person that we came across that was incarcerated during our work this past year was 14. But there are definitely states in which younger kids are incarcerated, and certainly in Illinois that would be the case as well. And then you would also have the age at which a child could be transferred to adult court, and that also varies from each state, sort of ranging anywhere from 14 on, but again, with some variety. So we're talking really young kids.
Thank you. So last question, also from from our comments. That's from John. It's a little long, and it's so stay with me. He asks you to consider one of Kennedy's famous quotes, which is, "Think not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." Okay, and so he goes on. The question inspired by this statement is: do we need a balance of ensuring that the system works for everyone and everyone works on living their lives in a way that helps the common good? So he's asking where's the balance between creating like a perfect system that works for every person, or just assuming that people also need to kind of grab themselves by their bootstraps and contribute to the common good, as he said. So what does this question statement evoke in you, just spontaneously? Yeah, Denzel, you can. You go.
Okay, I would say what I think about like that comment and quote, what just resonates to me, I would say, is that the system that like we live in, it's sometimes hard for us to like come to grasp with, but it's very like not balanced already, and it's so unbalanced that it's created like adverse systems that are against that balance already. So it's tough to because I know like a lot of people, even some of my own family members, they say, why don't those people in those neighborhoods and those communities stop picking up guns and stop picking up drugs and go get a job and do good for themselves? And like I was saying, is that because of those systems that's been working against, in particular, like groups of people and in neighborhood, and then also stripping them of like voting rights and like they strip them of the ability to, pick up their bootstraps and tie their laces up and go out and do something different. And it almost puts them in a cycle where, it's hard for them to do anything different. And a good example would also be the justice system should be fair and equal, but the state's attorney's office and the public defender's office are completely unbalanced. Like the state's attorney's office for the state and the policing force get an exponential amount of more money than the public defender system. So the people that have to defend you aren't even equal in the courtroom because they have more resources, they have more staffing, they have more funding, they have more opportunities to convict you. So that when you get convicted and you get out, you have less opportunities and resources than you had even previous to getting locked up. So how can you expect that person to flourish when you keep stripping them of so much? It just seems like it's almost impossible.
Thank you, Denzel. Are you okay with this answer, Sarah? Can we move on to, yeah? So we're about 10 minutes away from completing our talk. I want to thank the people that have been with us all along, those who have joined in the middle, those who will see this video later because it will remain available on our Act Together channel in both on Facebook and YouTube. So thank you, Rebecca, Mika, Rhea, for your comments and for being with us. So I want to ask you, what do you see as, of course, you have an ultimate result, which is a little far away, which is influencing the way the wheels of the mechanism of youth justice in the US are turning. But what are the results that you can already see from the work that you are doing? You know, maybe it's really micro, maybe it's just about how people are responding, or maybe you already start seeing some glimpse of change from within. You tell me. Sarah, yeah.
I can jump in. So I think, and I'm going to go really small with this because, you know, in terms of criminal justice and the juvenile justice system in the United States, I mean, we need incredible, incredible healing and reimagining and reshaping and really changing the way that we even conceptualize what does safety mean and really sort of very fundamental things. But I think for this project, in terms of tangible results, is really trying to pave the way to have collaborative youth-led and work and what that really looks like. And I know I mentioned before, but I think that is one achievement is, you know, writing a report, you know, saying, okay, we've collected all this data together, but absolutely we're going to write the report together and we're going to make sure that, you know, it is that we're carrying through the project in a collaborative way. And I also think in a very simplistic way, and I'm hesitant to say this because it is a very small thing to celebrate when you're thinking about sort of the totality of what young people face. But young people really responded well to the workshop that we did, which was very simple. We were just basically like, hey, this is your situation. Tell us how you might do it differently. I mean, this is not my patting us on the back like, wow, we had a good idea. The opposite. Like, it's almost like there is almost such a tragedy that underlies how effective it was and how powerful it was, because really we were just saying, this is the situation you're in. Tell us about what you think and tell us how you might do things differently. And I don't think very many young people had been asked that question. And so I just think it's something that we need to think a lot more about, and a lot more about who's at the table, whose voices are heard, and how we prioritize that and how we make that deliberate, and, you know, what incredible power there is there. So I know it's like, it's not, you know, one takes away the other, but I just think it's something that I really took away from this work. So.
How about you, Denzel? Is there something that you see as, you know, a result? Result is maybe far-fetched, but, you know, like something that moves because or through the work you do, that gives a sense of hope for the change you're trying to create?
I would definitely just, you know, echo what Sarah said. Like, after doing and holding those focus groups, the young people just saying how appreciative they were of us coming to hear what they have to say. You know, just them being happy that somebody's willing to listen. You know, and it sounds almost foreign and crazy because it's like all the questions that all the answers that we're looking for lie within them. You know, it lies within the young people because we're the system is governing their lives, and it all kind of goes back into like, what do you need so that you can be great? You know, because they're just young people. Like I was locked up when I was 15 years old. Many of what like you see of me today and like maybe charismatic or intellect and things like that, it didn't come from inside those jails walls. It always lied in me, and I took time into reading and trying to help myself. And so now I go back and I give that motivation to the youth, and I see them now, you know, becoming leaders and speaking out and, you know, standing for change. And I feel like that's definitely where it's going, and that's where it's at.
Yeah, let's try to create more spaces where this can happen. And this leads to, maybe it will be actually the last question I will ask you. We tend to think, or at least I'm going to speak for myself because I don't want to assume that other people are like me. We tend to think that, oh, this is in the US, you know, people, especially people, all the folks living in Europe, oh, this is like, my God, have you seen what they do to young people in the justice systems in the US? But there are justice systems everywhere, and there's young people everywhere, and there are young people involved in justice systems everywhere. So my question to you is, how could the international community, people that are not with you in Chicago, you know, either voting or supporting you, what can they do? How can they do what could they do to support the lives of these young people that you work with? Young people like, you know, like Denzel used to be.
You want me to go first?
Yeah, if you have whatever comes to your mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think because, you know, a lot of times, many people, like, since I've been doing this work, ask like, you know, how can I be involved or help, you know, with this push? And I think, you know, like on a greater note, you know, it all kind of starts with like even in your own areas and communities, even if you may be overseas, which is like the work that we're talking about now, and that me and Sarah do is like being supportive to a young person and having like a collaborative relationship that that you know you kind of just like you work with each other, and you don't, you know, like make me feel like you're super demanding or controlling my life, but you know you work with me. And in these particular, like, you know, instances within, you know, the justice systems and systems within you know, United States, like because of COVID, like it helped us so much even with like Zoom calls, so that like I can even talk to Luis in a different country, and we can relay information and like things like this, you know, giving me a chance to speak on my experiences, ways we can help different youth, and then connecting, you know, resources that others may have in different places and areas, and knowledge, you know, that you may have to pass on and share.
How about you, Sarah?
I think in a very specific way, Denzel and I were talking, you know, we were leading a workshop, and, you know, we were sort of saying, you know, well, what would you do? How would you change the system? What would you, and they're like, we should just make it like, you know, Norway or Switzerland or whatever they do. And I think there is a conception, because for sure, you know, most of the European systems are not sentencing kids to excessive sentences or life sentences. And there's a much more sort of what seems to us, right, to be a much more supportive system that's in place. And I think one thing that is interesting is like having more conversations in which we're like, we often have this idea like, well, we just need the next good idea, and we need to reinvent the wheel and start over. And in some cases that's true. And in some cases, a lot of the ideas are out there, and a lot of the obstacles may be similar. And I think having sort of more, international conversations about how we can take care of young people the best way possible. I mean, I always say, if aliens came from outer space and landed in Chicago and knew that we were locking kids up in cages, that's not okay, and there is a better way, and we can work together to figure it out, I think. So
yeah, maybe the question it is large is more about how do we, and when I say we, I speak as an adult, you know, as how do we relate to children and young people, and how do we see each other as partners in this planet Earth that we are sharing, really. You know, we're kind of all in this together. So what are we doing are we creating the best conditions in these various systems? Or is this the best that we can do? I ask myself that question a lot. Okay, I don't want to delay you any further, or the people that are with us. Just very quick thank you to both you, Denzel and Sarah, for being with us and sharing your perspective and your work. We're going to put all the little facts and links and whatever you guys want to share in the description of this video. I want to thank my colleague Emma, who has been making all these little, you know, windows move back and forth, and she's as engaged, you know, hardworking as we are on making this happen, and also to the Learning for Wellbeing Foundation for making this happen. Also, an extended thank you to all the people that were with us, that were commenting, that will comment afterwards when they see this video offline. And you guys don't know, but there's a lot of people that are making Act Together happen, that volunteer, people of all ages, and they also have helped this first session happen in next sessions. Last thing I'm going to say, next session will be entitled The Parents That Teenagers Want. And we'll have Dean talking about how parents and teenagers can help each other grow in the context of their families. So if you're interested, stay tuned and join us for the next session next month. Okay, so we're going to say goodbye to everybody. Bye, Denzel. Bye, Sarah. Thank you for being with us.